After a long while, we're back inside the garage with the 1964 Chevy C10 that we recovered last year from a backyard it sat in for 23 years. We're going to pick up right where we left off on this old truck. We've already replaced the fuel tank, the fuel pump, changed the oil, spark plugs, and spark plug wires, and now it's finally time to get the headlights working, brakes replaced, bed replaced, interior done, paint job done. The list continues. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to work. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the plug-in right here and the connections right here, just to kind of see what they look like. I've got my test light out here. We might not need it. All I know is the headlights aren't working right now. Let's find out why. Because it would be nice to be able to see where I'm going. So this little plug-in here plugs into this little plug-in here, which goes straight to the grill. This goes into the cab. And looking at these connections, they're actually really clean, but the connections that go into the grill area, they could probably use some cleaning. So that's kind of what we'll start with. Go ahead and clean and check all the connections. Make sure that nothing's unplugged, nothing's got a bunch of corrosion on it, nothing's got rust, dirt, whatever. The wire looks pretty good. Normally I'd go and get my multimeter and test the line from the plug-in here to the plug-in here to make sure that we don't have like a high ohm or anything like that, or even a broken connection. But like I said, these look pretty good. I mean, they're still wrapped and everything. So what I'll start with is I'll go get some circuit board cleaner, squirt all these out, try to file them up so that there's at least something shiny on the connections, and then we'll work our way into the cab. Now, my suspicion is that it's either the dimmer switch or the high beam, low beam switch on the floor. Probably more likely the one on the floor, because that's where all the rust and grime and water, yeah, all that comes from. So I'll start here and we'll work our way into the cab. And I'm not going to really be able to get into the female end on the plug-in, but I can try. I don't think this is thin enough. No, that's not thin enough. So we might just have to be good with what we've got here on this plug-in and that plug-in down here. Like I said, it's easy to do the male ends because they're out in the open. But the female ones, they're inside of the other end of the plug, which makes it really difficult to fit anything inside of there to file or scratch or anything to get any kind of gunk or corrosion off that could increase the ohms and make resistance. But I think we'll be all right with that end of things. I think we're all right to plug the battery in now and put these together and see where it sends us next. So inside the cab now, we're going to test the headlight dimmer dome switch, the multi-switch, as well as the high beam low beam switch on the floor. So I think it's the high beam low beam switch, either the plug-in that goes to it or the switch itself, because it gets all the dirt and grime and just more wear and tear than what you get up here. Even though you are turning that on and off, you shouldn't be getting any mud, dirt, dust. Well, probably dust, but you know what I mean. The one on the floor is the one that gets the dirtiest. So, but we'll check to make sure we've got power coming to this before we get too carried away. And then we'll check to make sure we're getting power out of that. Now, I do know that we're getting some sort of power out of it because you can turn it on halfway, pulling it out to about there. And it turns on the tail lights as well as the running lights. And when you pull it out fully, the tail lights stay on, but we just don't have any headlights. So it could be a problem with the actual circuit for the headlights, or it's this switch, or it's the switch down there. That's what we're going to find out. So to take this out so we can get in there and clean it, there's a little button on the side that you just depress, and then you can pull this out. That is what the little button looks like right there on the side of the switch. So pull the switch out like you turn the headlights on, press in the switch, knob comes out. So now that we have the knob out, we'll go ahead and spray some of that goop in there. If you want to turn the lights off, all you got to do is put it back in, push it down. You have to press that button again in order to open up the latch that latches onto this little guy right here. So that's why it's loose in there. And don't try to just slam it in there because it won't go in. You have to press that button and then snap it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that circuit board cleaner, spray it in there, let it sit for a second, and we'll put this back in, turn it on and off a bunch. Then we'll squirt in on just the edge of this to hopefully flush it out while we're turning it on and off, twisting it side to side to clean up anything that might be gunking this up. So now I'm going to let it sit there and drain for a second, and then I'm going to put the knob back in. So now that that's mostly dry in there, I'm going to go ahead and press the button in. And that's all there is to it for taking out that little switch. Now, try my best to get in there. It's already feeling tons better than it did. Yeah, we're getting some brownish black drips out of it now. So this is probably dirty and corroded. So this might not be the problem. We might have had power this whole time, and it's that switch down there on the floor. But at least we've crossed this T. Well, I'm going to go ahead and save this. We might need it later. So let's go down and take a look at what we've got for that plug-in. Alright, so now that we're on the floor and under the dash, I'm going to go ahead and unplug the plug-in that goes to the lamp, which is pretty relatively easy to remove. I might need to get you guys in here closer so you can see what I'm looking at. So this 7-pin connector right here is the connector that goes directly to our headlight switch. And there's 3 connectors that should be hot. And that's this one right here, this one right here, and yeah, all of them are good. So now that we know that all 3 of these have power going to the switch, that means that technically speaking, each one of these, once put into the right position, should receive power, sending power down to our headlights or our tail lights, running lights, what have you. But in order to get to the headlights, we have to go through the switch on the floor. So now that we know that we have a hot here, we should also have a hot down there, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. So underneath the floor, right here is where the high and low beam switch goes, and it looks like this. I've already got it taken out so we can look at our plug-in. Now, this plug-in here, it's not in the greatest of shape. You can see kind of right here on the very edge that there was rust in here. So we're going to have to clean up these connections, and the wires are pretty loose inside the plug. So I think this might be our problem, but let's go ahead and test and make sure that this lead right here, this connector, has power, because this is our main power. This blue wire that then goes into the switch and directs to either the low beams or the high beams, whichever one corresponds. So we're gonna turn the headlights on and touch our test light. We do have power there. So I'm thinking that our problem was in fact the switch. So we're gonna go ahead and test the switch now and clean up the contacts. So we can get a more accurate reading on our multimeter, I'm gonna go ahead and clean the connectors on this switch because they covered in rust, grime, and all kinds of stuff just from sitting down there on the floor. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that with this wire wheel. Be sure you put your safety glasses on because you only got the two. So what we'll be testing for on this, now that it's all nice and clean, I even took the time to kind of clean up the outside of it too, but we're going to be testing for ohms on this. So go ahead and get this thing turned on and let it zero out. Put it to ohms. So 1 with a point means that there's no connection at all. Not a single connection, nothing. But when we put it together, that means we have no ohms of resistance, which sometimes you do want some ohms of resistance depending on what you're working on. But for what we're doing here, we want a nice, clean connection. And that's what that means. So let's go ahead and set this thing to, let's set it to 200. That should be good enough. So we'll go ahead. So this is our main lead. So right there, we don't have any connection at all, which means we should have connection over here. And we do. No ohms of resistance. So now we'll go ahead and press the button, which is either turning on the high beams or turning off the high beams. So as you can see, oh, all right, so that works too. So, yeah, our switch is a little worn out. And you can kind of see that our ohm meter was kind of getting a little crazy on that. But we do have a good switch, which technically means if we have power, we've cleaned the connections through the engine bay. The only next spot would be the actual grounds on the headlights. But before we take apart the dash and go through and do all that, we'll go ahead and reinstall this, or at least plug it in, and see if our headlights turn on. Okay, so I've got the switch plugged back in and sitting in the cab now. I haven't bolted it in yet. We're just going to flip the lights on and see if anything comes out of these old things. Hey, we got lights! Perfect! So all we did, oh hey, check that out. There's a little light on the dash that says bright, which means we're on the brightest our headlights will go. But we've got headlights on the Chevy again. So now we've got the headlights working on the truck, and all that had to happen was some cleaning of some connections. The harness under the hood, the switch on the dash, and the switch on the floor. Now this harness under the hood and the switch on the dash were probably not our problem, and it was definitely the switch on the floor with how grimy and corroded it was. But hey, we now know that the connections under the hood and on the dash and now on the floor are all cleaned, so if you have problems with the headlights again, it's probably within the grill. We are going to have to take the grill off at some point, and we'll have to wait for that for the next video. because we've got some stuff we need to replace in there as well. But I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and if you're new to the channel, go back and watch some of our older videos. There's a lot more videos on this Chevy when we first bring it home, get it running, and a few other things here and there, as well as some other projects that we've worked on in the past year. So make sure you like and subscribe, share this video or channel with your friends, and we'll see you back here at the garage in the next one.